Today we're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of society. For most of human history, 90% of human history, all human beings on the planet lived in a form of social organization that anthropologists call hunting and gathering tribes or foraging tribes. So this is, from the inception of modern humans for 90% of human history. And hunting and gathering tribes generally consist of bands of around 100 to 150 people. When bands get up around 150 people, they tend to split. If they drop, they tend to consolidate. And in these bands, everyone is connected through blood or marriage. The society is essentially a big extended family. It's a huge kin group. So think about that for a minute. An entire society uh, comprised of 100 to 150 people. In a typical day in Jacksonville, you will see more people than many hunter-gatherers would see in their entire lives. Just walking around campus, you'll see more people than most hunter-gatherers would see in their entire lives. Most of ancient people in hunting and gathering tribes never traveled more than 50 miles from the place where they were born. And the reason why they call them hunting and gathering tribes or foraging tribes is pretty simple. There were only two jobs. The men hunt and the women gather. Every day when people get up in the morning, the men would go hunt for game and protein, and the women would also tend the children and gather vegetable matter and fiber for everyone to eat. There was no cultivation of plants or domestication of food animals of any kind. So what you are a basic nomadic tribe uh, ranging over a territory, hunting for game, and gathering. Now, if you think about a tribe of 100, 150 people, imagine how much food that is that you have to come up with in a day to feed the tribe. Think about how many deer or antelope or how many rabbits or how many wild hens you would need to collect in order to feed the tribe. And so the earth was very sparsely populated. There were humans, in just about every corner of the earth, but it was very sparsely populated. And what would happen is a tribe would exhaust the resources in one part of their range, and then they would move to another part of their range. And these nomadic tribes had no uh, private property of any kind. Now, if you think about it, imagine you're going on a lifelong camping trip. Everything you own, you have to carry on you. You're only going to take what you need. There's virtually no technology. All there is, maybe a bow and arrow and a satchel and some moccasins and a bladder that holds some water, and that's really all you've got. At night, you make a lean-to under the trees and sleep in it, and that's it. There's no private property because there's nothing to own. There's no control over the environment besides basic food and shelter. There's no written language of any kind. Hunting and gathering bands have been around for over 100,000 years, but writing is only about 5,000 years old. So all of the culture, all of the norms of the society are passed on through oral tradition. Uh, there was no, if you think about the way that we control our population and control the environment, there was no such thing as birth control. Um, they reproduced to meet the level of their resources, although they weren't as fertile as modern humans are, because it was a very difficult life, and people had a hard time getting enough calories to sustain themselves. And we know that in order for women to achieve menarche or to have a normal cycle, they have to have a certain amount of body fat. And in our society, it's easy to get that much body fat. You have to prevent acquiring too much body fat in our society, but in their society, hunting and gathering societies, it was difficult to acquire enough calories to have enough surplus to actually reproduce. Uh, and for this reason, infant mortality rates were extremely high. Half of all people, half of all children in hunting and gathering tribes would die before they made it to adulthood. Part of that is just how tough life is, and the other is that there was no medical technology. I mean, ask yourself, what kind of shape you'd be in if it wasn't for medical technology. I mean, how many of you listening to me would be dead right now without modern medicine? Have you had your appendix out? That's a routine operation in our society, but it was 100% fatal for a hunter-gatherer. Did you have your wisdom teeth impacted? There was no dental surgery. In a hunting and gathering society, those wisdom teeth would get infected and you would die. When I was 25 years old, I broke my femur. And I was in the hospital for a while, and they had to do some surgery, but they eventually repaired my femur. Well, if I was a hunter-gatherer, I would have died from that. So life was very, very precarious. But this is the way that we have evolved to live. This is the natural type of environment that we are meant to be in. All other human environments are artificial. And if we're not living in a hunter-gathering environment, we are essentially fish out of water. And let me give you some examples of this. Right? I mean, our societies have evolved much faster than our bodies have been able to evolve. And so even though you live in a modern society, you still have a hunter-gatherer brain. And many of the modern problems that we face in our society are because we are biological hunter-gatherers in a sort of artificial technological society. So think about, what is ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, a very common malady. There's not a classroom in America that doesn't have a kid that struggles with ADHD. And this is the inability to concentrate for a long period of time or to remain focused on a particular topic. In a hunting and gathering tribe where you are, you're foraging and looking for game, ADHD would not be a problem. It would be a personality style. It's not that the genes that cause ADHD or the type of thinking that is found among people with ADHD didn't exist. It has always existed. It's just only a problem in modern society. ADHD becomes a problem when instead of having children follow their parents into the field, we ask children to sit still for 6 hours a day in a desk and put their nose in a book. Like, you're not evolved for that. You're not designed to do that. And that's why some people have a problem doing it. Or think about dyslexia. Dyslexia, the prefix dys means problem or bad. Lexia for words. Dyslexia is trouble reading. Well, what is dyslexia in a culture with no written language? There's no such thing. I mean, it wouldn't even exist. Or think about social anxiety disorder. I often ask my students, how many of you would be nervous if you had to stand up in front of a class and give a lecture, if you had to give a speech? Well, there is no social anxiety disorder when you know everyone personally. And in a tribe of 100 to 150, you would know everyone personally. Think about a society with no private property. And then think about, I saw this show, I can't remember what station it was on, but it was about these people that have a form of OCD that cause them to hoard things. In fact, the show was called Hoarders, where people are unable to throw things away. Their houses are literally stacked with junk that they have been unable to get rid of. How could there be hoarding when there's no private property? Right? It wouldn't be possible. So I'm not saying that OCD is not a real thing. It is a real thing, but that kind of manifestation is only possible in a modern society. Or I mentioned earlier the obesity epidemic. For 90% of human history, the problem has been not being able to get enough calories. And that is why you are biologically designed to love the taste of fatty foods and to love the taste of sugar, because those things are calorie dense, and they're the kinds of things that you need when you are a hunter-gatherer. Well, that is why in an era of abundance, where it's not difficult to get a hold of these things, we eat too much because too much has never been an issue for 90% of human history. You're biologically engineered to eat that when you can get it, and you're not designed to live in an environment where that is overly abundant. Uh, think about beauty standards. What kind of expectation do you have for the physical appearance of your significant other in a society of 150 people? I imagine your expectations would be quite realistic. Whereas today, you have people who are literally combing the world looking for the absolute most beautiful specimens so that they can hold those people up in front of all of us and show us what standards of beauty are. And so you can see why people have problems with body image or problems with the way that they look when they look perfectly fine. It's just that they're not absolute paragons of beauty. Right? So these are uh, the things that I am getting at. That all of these things exist because you're bucking your biology. The biological organism can't adapt fast enough to keep up with the culture. We sort of live in a zoo that we have constructed for ourselves. And this is the kind of society that dominated human history. What I've done is I put all from the inception of modern humans. I've made a chart here from the beginning of anatomically modern humans to today. You can see the blue slice, 90% of human history, uh, hunting and gathering societies. It wasn't until the last 10% of human history, going back maybe few 5,000-7,000 years, that we have true agriculture and the true domestication, full domestication of animals and plants. And you can see that tiny little sliver right there, that little green slice. Almost all of the history that you have learned takes place in that little slice. The entire history of the United States essentially takes place in that little slice that constitutes 0.3% of human history. And that's why I'm saying that we are not engineered to live in the kind of society that we live in. Okay? So let's move on now from the hunting and gathering society to the agricultural society. In time, humans were able to domesticate animals and plants, and society transformed into one that had permanent dwellings. Instead of going out and gathering our food, we produce our food. And because we are producing our food on land, uh, this allowed societies to get much larger and led to the birth of the first state level societies. Now, how exactly societies transformed from hunting and gathering to agriculture was a central question for the sociological theorists, early sociological theorists, but that is something that would be covered in a sociological theory class. And in my sociological theory class, we spend a lot of time talking about that. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, sociological theory is the class you should take. But basically what's happened is you've sort of moved from, in plow agriculture, you've moved from human labor to produce food to animal labor to produce food. A team of oxen is infinitely more powerful than a human in terms of its just raw muscle. And you can plant a field with a team of oxen a lot faster than you can plant a field with a crude hoe. And so you have a massive increase in food production. But one byproduct of this is social inequality. In hunting and gathering bands, for instance, because there's no private property and because there's no surplus, there really is no class-based inequality. These bands are considered to be egalitarian. People are essentially equal in rank. Not only that, a rule that anthropologists typically uh, 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 present is one that says that women's status relative to men's is highest when women contribute about as much to the economy as men do. So in a hunting and gathering tribe, hunting is indispensable. You need that protein. But gathering is also indispensable. You need the vitamins and fiber. And so women's work is just as important as men's work. And so you see very little gender inequality in hunting and gathering tribes. They tend to be egalitarian on the basis of social class and egalitarian on the basis of gender because women are important contributors to the economy. But in agricultural society, what happens is women are displaced. It is just a fundamental feature of the species that the average man is stronger than the average woman, and the average man is better at pulling a plow behind a team of oxen than the average woman. The agriculture required a lot of brawn and a lot of upper body strength, and what this did was it gave men sole dominance over the economic sphere and relegated women to the domestic sphere. It removed women from the economic realm, and when that happened, their status relative to men fell dramatically. In agricultural societies, you see for the first time polygyny or polygamy, the practice of having more than one wife, or rules about women as property. And some of those things are still legacies or vestiges of those things still exist in our society today. And we'll talk about those when we get to gender. But one byproduct of the domestication of plants and animals would be horrible economic inequality. The next transition was one where we moved from animal labor to machine labor. And this is, of course, industrialization. And industrial economies are built on manufacturing, where we use factories and assembly lines to build things. And this was the dominant form of economy throughout the 20th century. But in recent years, we have moved away from industrialization. You'll notice in the United States that we don't do our manufacturing base has essentially moved to other countries where labor is cheaper. We don't really build a lot of things in the United States anymore. So if we're not an industrial economy and we are not based in manufacturing, what is it that Americans do? What is it that rich Western democracies do? Well, we live in an information age or an information-based economy. And in an information-based economy, productivity is based on specialized knowledge, the manipulation and the mastery of specialized knowledge. One of the reasons so many of you are in school and will remain in school throughout most of your 20s if you go get a master's degree is because there are credentials and there is a body of knowledge that you need to master in order to get a good job in this economy. In an agricultural economy, you can herd sheep when you're 15 years old. You're economically viable at age 15. In an industrial economy, once you're physically mature, you can work on the assembly line. There's not much you need to know to sort of turn a screwdriver or work a press or something like that. But now, to be an attorney or to be a physician or to be an architect, there's a massive body of knowledge that you need to master, and that requires a lot of schooling. So, strong backs are worth less than they used to be, and big brains are worth more. And one of the things that you see, of course, in these information-based economies is that things even out with respect to gender equality, right? Things were fairly gender egalitarian in the hunting and gathering society because, remember the rule, women contributed about as much as men. And now the same is true in the information age. It is certainly the case that the average woman is less able to pull a plow behind a team of oxen than the average man. But there's no difference in IQs between men and women. A woman can be a physician just as easily as a man. A woman can be an architect just as easily as a man. A woman can do, in terms of these mental occupations, women can do them just as well as men, and that is why we see the rise and flourishing of feminism and women's equality, because they are no longer relegated to the domestic sphere. They are now integral to the economy. So this is a very brief thumbnail of societal evolution from the primordial hunting and gathering society that all of our ancestors lived in, to the kind of information age technological society that we live in today.